Before you say it, yes, it has been far too long, and there has been far too much that has happened in my own personal life to explain, maybe in a stream or video someday. But rest assured, I have returned to stay, and returned with a vengeance. I have some great content for you all to make up for these long 2 years of silence. So let's start today with discussing audible differences between EQ plugins, or the lack of audible differences between EQ plugins. A few years ago, when I first started this channel, I did a few videos of my playing around with the Cush Audio Electra and Clariphonic Mark II EQs through Plugin Doctor. The comments that arose from those videos were in the spirit of, if it's not adding any character, then what is it doing? I already have the Pro Q3. When it comes to clean EQs that do not impart character, color, or saturation, this is a valid point, especially with quality parametric EQs like the Pro Q3 or the Kirchoff EQ. And the answer is, it's not always about the sound, but the speed and efficiency. In EQ terms, if the curves get you to your destination faster, then it's useful, but if not, you don't really need it. That said, I know that your thoughts are on the Electra and Clariphonic and whether they null against the Pro Q3 or the Kirchoff. So let's get to a quick test. Of course, that test is going to be a null test, where I've copied the EQ curves from the Clariphonic Mark II as close as possible using the Pro Q3, and you will notice that they almost perfectly null. Curve-wise, there are some differences, nothing too major, but it is audible. But there is another underlying reason, and that is the phase. Let's take a look at the comparison of the curves. The main major difference between the curves was that I wasn't able to recreate the exact low-pass shape of the Clariphonic, which has a different response to the phase. When you are using a cutoff filter, the more drastic the slope, the more the phase will be affected more dramatically. In Pro Q3, I ended up using the brick wall low pass shape to try best to imitate the slope on the Clariphonic, but you will notice they don't match up. Not the slope and definitely not the phase response. And before you go ahead and say that phase won't make a difference, yes they do. And to show you that, here is a null test using the Pro Q3 Clariphonic preset that I made, one in 0 latency and the other in natural. As you can hear, they do not perfectly null. Let's go back to Plugin Doctor. When you select either 0 latency or natural phase, you will notice that the phase responses are different enough. Take a look at how the Clariphonic handles the phase. You can see that the phase differences are around the parts of the frequency spectrum that didn't null. Same thing applies to the other instance of Pro Q3. Now let's take a look at the Electra and see what happens in Plugin Doctor. Same concept, using the Pro Q3 to copy the curves from the Electra. You can see that the Electra has the same low-pass semi-brick wall filter at the top of the frequency spectrum, just like the Clariphonic. The only difference is that there is also a high-pass filter at the bottom of the frequency spectrum. Look at the phase. There are less differences than that of the Clariphonic. In theory, This would mean that the null might be closer to perfect. Let's take a listen. They almost perfectly null except for some transient information in the high frequencies. So what does this mean? It means that if you have a Pro Q3 or a Kirchoff EQ, there are some EQs you won't need. However, the Electra and the Clariphonic have a way of dealing with specific curves very quickly. Also keep in mind that the Electra has proportional EQ curve changes in the midbands depending on how you boost. So there is also that function. Know your tools and buy what is useful for your workflow. You don't need the vast majority of plugins, you just need the right ones. Utilize demos more often and make sure to determine whether or not a plugin will help you get more jobs by improving your speed and workflow and improve your efficiency and maintaining quality. That is all for this video. As always, happy mixing.